You are listening to Nebraska on Tap. This podcast will tap you into the Natural Resources District, managing Nebraska's water since 1972. Whether you are a farmer, rancher, or citizen of Nebraska, this podcast was made for you. Time to tap into this week's episode. This podcast is hosted by Heather Dismang and brought to you by the Middle Republican Natural Resources District.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Nebraska on Tap. This week we are talking to Julie. She is out of Rock Creek, down here in southwest Nebraska. Fish hatcheries are used for a variety of purposes, including wildlife conservation, the sustainable fisheries, the threatened and endangered species, tribal partnerships, and fish hatcheries are a combination of a laboratory and a farm where fish are spawned, hatched, and cared for, and fish kept in the hatchery are there until they're large enough to be released into the wild or moved to another fish farm. And now we're going to get into that conversation that I had with Julie about some of these things.
My name is Julie Fraley. I work for the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission here at Rock Creek State Fish Hatchery. I grew up in Michigan by way of Missouri, came to work in Nebraska. I worked at a small fish hatchery / trout park in Cassville, Missouri called Roaring River for the Missouri Department of Conservation. And then I wanted to increase kind of what I did for fisheries, so I applied for a job here in Nebraska, became the Conservation Tech 2 at Rock Creek State Fish Hatchery, and within 8 years, I became the manager of Rock Creek State Fish Hatchery.
That is so awesome. So tell me a little bit about the Rock Creek Fish Hatchery there in Park, Julie.
So Rock Creek here was actually built in 1913 as a private trout hatchery. In 1924, the state purchased it after the Great Depression, and we were actually running a hatchery within Binkelman at the same time. In 1972, the water quality, I believe, turned at the state hatchery in Binkelman, and they fully came out here to Rock Creek. They have always raised trout. They've raised brown trout, they've raised rainbow trout. They used to do brood stock back in the 20s and the 30s. It wasn't until later on that we started doing what we call the catchable size, which is 10 inches. Normally, when fish production is doing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of fish, they'll stock them out at 5 inches. Normally, when you stock more fish at a smaller size, you're figuring 25% survival out into the wild. When we raise a 10-inch fish, it is so that it is more apt to survive out into the wild.
Gotcha.
We stock all over western Nebraska, east to Kearney, a lot of urban lakes and ponds in city centrals, and that is so that we get people out and fishing. Grandpa and Grandma may not want to take their grandchildren all the way out to a big lake to go fishing, but they might want to go to their city lake or park and go fishing. It's a great opportunity for kids to go fishing, or even just the older population that doesn't necessarily use the bigger parks. So it gives everybody the opportunity to go fishing in Nebraska.
Yeah. And so do you guys only do cold water trout, or do you do warm water species as well?
So we do have some warm water ponds on site. This year we raised rock bass that went up to Fort Robinson. We raised yellow perch, which went into Enders Reservoir. And we are currently raising bluegill, which will go into the Frenchman ponds near Palisade. Our warm water species all depend on what is called for from our other hatcheries, and we supplement what they necessarily don't have room for in their ponds. Nebraska has 4 trout hatcheries and 1 rearing station. They are a mix of warm water and cold water and cool water species. North Platte focuses more on the catfish, the walleye, the tiger muskie, some of the smaller panfish. They do a lot with mussel research and mussel propagation there. I won't go into that one.
That's okay.
It's complicated.
That's fine.
Calamus Hatchery at Burwell does warm water species or cool water species. They do catfish, bluegill, yellow perch, plus trout. Our Grove Rearing Station produces mainly rainbow trout. They have done cutthroats in the past. Valentine State Fish Hatchery does almost all of our largemouth, smallmouth bass, bluegill, and yellow perch production.
Do you guys have trade agreements with other states to supply fish to them as well?
So with our trade agreements with our other states, it's mainly switching eggs and milt. It's so that our walleye, if you're looking at breeding possibilities, is that we're not stunting our population growth. Mm-hmm. And if we can collect more walleye eggs and we could get milt from another state and then switch them eggs and milt so that their walleye production will go up. That allows us for the trout facilities to get trout eggs from these different places also. It's just a little known fact, but we do all of our disease inspections. So transporting fish across state lines, we make sure that we have all of our inspections ready to go, because you're not supposed to transport fish across state lines because of diseases.
Understood.
A lot of the private hatcheries in the state of Nebraska have to go through a lot of disease inspections before they can transport wherever they're going to go. And we do have several private water hatcheries in Nebraska.
So you were telling me you just got back from Grand Island recently.
For Grand Island, we actually took fish to the state fair.
Oh,
so we actually have a mobile aquarium that goes to different places. It's at the Fort Kearny Expo. So it is a giant pull-behind trailer aquarium that people can see several different species here in Nebraska. So I took up some of our 12 to 14 inch rainbow trout that we had on our facility to put in that tank so people could see them.
Oh, that's really cool. I haven't been to the state fair in a little while, but that's awesome for anybody who is planning on being there or going. Mm-hmm. And you guys do that every year?
Every year.
That's awesome. Do you guys take your fish, though, to release them, or does somebody come pick them up and release them?
We take them. So on a normal day that we would be hauling fish, we have fish already in our raceways that are up to size, 10 inches or above. And we load our truck with water, which is coming out of our spring, which is 57 degrees, onto a 4-compartment insulated aluminum tank. We put the amount of fish we need to go stocking, depending on where it is. Different sizes of lakes get different amounts of fish. Mm-hmm. So we get them on there. The oxygen's already turned on. We turn on the aerators. And once we get all the fish loaded, we head down the road. And once we get to the lake or pond where we're stocking, we take our tubes off the truck, hook them up, and put them out into the water.
That's really awesome. And then anything else or any other fun facts you kind of want to share? How you survive living in the middle of nowhere?
That's the easy part. I love it out here.
I know. It is really pretty out there. I'm just joking with you, though.
Oh, I know. Fun facts. I mean, basically, we raise trout so you guys go fishing. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is our purpose, is you guys get out and enjoy Nebraska, go fishing. With our other hatcheries, it's like with our walleye and stuff, it's to supplement the fishing that we have on walleye. With our pan species, with our bluegill and our yellow perch, a lot of it is to have forage out there, especially when we've previously renovated a pond or a lake, is to start out with species that are going to be food for the larger species, just so that we're not dumping in large fish and then expecting them to survive without groceries.
Right, and that makes sense, especially when they have to lower the water in the pond because of invasive species like zebra clams or anything like that, too. Well, I guess one more question is, what about interesting types of fish?
When we do sawguy, so a sawguy is a combination between a walleye and a sauger. I'm not sure we have natural occurring sauger in the state.
What type of purpose do they serve, or what do they do?
Get big. they get big.
Oh, they get big.
I mean, when you hybridize a fish, normally you're taking out their, and this is just in general, when you hybridize something, they don't tend to necessarily spawn.
Mm-hmm.
They'll try to, but their purpose is just to get big because they don't focus on actually spawning and using that energy in their body. So then they just grow big.
So it's kind of like a mule almost.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And the same for a fish. And some species hybridize on their own and can spawn, like bluegill and red ear, because they're so similar. They spawn at the same time. They'll hybridize, and then they'll keep spawning. And depending on what the spawn looks like, it can look like a bluegill or it can look like a red ear. When we did tiger trout, are a natural occurring hybrid between a brook and a brown trout because they spawn at the same time of year in the same substrate in a creek or in a river. So there are certain ones that will spawn and be out there naturally.
That's really cool to know.
And then there's some that we just do it ourselves. Yeah, it all depends on the species, but when they're so similar and share the same habitat, normally you have rainbows that will, I don't know if they spawn in the same place as like a brown trout because I've never heard of that kind of cross. But I know that brook and browns, and that ends up with a tiger trout. Yeah,
well, we do a lot of catfish tournaments over here in Curtis area, but I've seen a lot of bluegill when I go to like the lakes, like Red Willow Lake and stuff like that, and especially Cambridge Lake too. So
yeah, and they can just get huge in there if they can survive the culling.
Well, that's awesome. I guess anything else?
We have a lot of YouTube videos out there about Nebraska Game Parks Commission now, and we're actually doing a 100-year one on Rock Creek.
Oh, that's really cool.
No, it's I've seen the rough at it. It's gorgeous.
That's awesome.
And I guess the other thing to add is Rock Creek State Fish Hatchery is open 7 days a week, and you may come take a tour between 8 and 4 Mountain Time.
Well, thanks, Julie, for so much for your time today and some really awesome things about the fish hatchery.
Sure.
All right. Thanks again, Julie. That's some really awesome facts that we learned today. I hope everybody found something really interesting from that interview that I had with her. And I hope you go down and check out your local fish hatchery to see how everything's done because, you know, where would we be without them if we wanted to go fishing? We probably couldn't as much. As always, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's edition of Nebraska on Tap. Again, you can find us on all those socials. You can also go to www.nebraskaontap.com and find everything there as well. So we look forward to coming back next week with a brand new episode for everybody. So stay tuned for that. Talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.